He didn't lose her when she left. He lost her when he mistook her for light instead of mirror. Every man does this once. He confuses reflection for salvation, presence for possession, and only when the mirror is gone does he realize it was never her face he was chasing, but the shadow she carried. Regret does not come from love's end, but from awakening too late to what love was meant to reveal. When the woman's shadow withdraws, his world collapses not because she is absent, but because the unconscious is suddenly visible. What he once called her darkness now calls to him by name. A man does not regret losing the woman herself. He regrets losing the psychic field where his anima once spoke. Her laughter, her silence, her contradictions, they were the language of his inner feminine. Through her, he tasted a softness he could not bear to own, and when she leaves, that exile returns. He blames her departure, yet what he mourns is his own disconnection from soul. Projection is the first architecture of desire. He meets her and feels recognition, a magnetic pull disguised as destiny. It is not her he sees, but the lost feminine within himself. She becomes the stage on which his unlived emotions perform, the tenderness he suppresses, the sensitivity he mocks, the surrender he fears. To love her is to approach the threshold of his own vulnerability, yet the ego resists what it cannot control, so he idealizes her instead. Idealization is the mind's anesthesia against intimacy. Every ideal hides an unconscious rejection. When he calls her perfect, what he truly says is, "You are everything I am not allowed to be." He turns her into symbol, stripping her of reality. She ceases to be woman, she becomes the vessel of his forgotten soul. But projections always decay under the heat of real relationship. What he worships soon begins to irritate him, and what he adored becomes unbearable. Her mystery turns to confusion. Her strength turns to threat. Her emotion turns to demand. He begins to see her shadow, but it is not hers he sees. It is his. The man who cannot hold his own darkness will blame it on the woman who mirrors it. He calls her too emotional, too unpredictable, too much, because his own anima has been exiled from his conscious life. He cannot touch his pain directly, so he accuses her of embodying it. He defends himself with reason, control, detachment. But the more he resists, the more her presence disturbs him. She becomes a mirror he wants to break yet cannot stop looking into. Every argument hides a deeper confession. I cannot face what you awaken in me. His coldness is protection, not indifference. His withdrawal is fear, not peace. And when she finally leaves, when the mirror shatters, he stands alone with the fragments of his own face. That is when regret begins. Regret is not remorse for what was done. It is recognition of what was unseen. It arrives not in the mind but in the body as quiet collapse. It is the psyche's way of saying, the image you loved was never her, it was you, disguised as other. You feel it too, that strange emptiness after she's gone. It's not the absence of her presence but the withdrawal of your projection. You don't miss her as a person, you miss who you were allowed to become in her gaze. Without her, you fall back into the old exile, self-controlled, logical, efficient, but hollow. The silence that follows love's end is not punishment, it is invitation. Every man is haunted by the woman who carried his soul. Jung called her the anima, the inner feminine, both muse and mirror. She draws him into relationship not to complete him, but to confront him. Through her, he meets his own unlived life. Through her rejection, he is forced to reclaim it. But this truth is unbearable until he has lost her. Only when her shadow is gone does the projection dissolve enough for him to see. He realizes he never knew her. He only knew the parts of himself she animated. The tenderness he longed for, the chaos he feared, the passion he worshipped, these were not hers alone. They were his, waiting for integration. A man's regret, then, is not tragedy. It is initiation. The pain that follows loss is the psychic fire that burns away illusion. The woman who left becomes the midwife of his awakening. Through her absence, he encounters the living image of his own feminine soul, stripped of fantasy. This is where love begins, not in possession but in recognition. When he finally stops chasing her memory and begins to listen to his own silence, he discovers something deeper than longing. The anima he once projected outward now speaks within. Her voice is no longer in the world but in the heart. He sees that she was never meant to stay, she was meant to lead him back to himself. Still, most men resist this death of illusion. They chase replacement after replacement, confusing repetition with redemption. But the unconscious never forgets. The same pattern will rise again until awareness intervenes. Only a man who can hold the memory without idealizing it, who can face the loss without collapsing into blame, becomes sovereign in his own psyche. She leaves and he finally sees. He doesn't regret losing her love, he regrets wasting the mirror. Love becomes distortion the moment he demands certainty from it. Certainty is the ego's substitute for truth, an attempt to control what was meant to dissolve him. A man seeks structure where the soul demands surrender, and when she no longer reflects his design, he calls it betrayal. But what he really means is, she stopped protecting his illusion. The feminine does not betray, she reveals. Every time she shifts, withdraws, or contradicts herself, she is enacting the psyche's own fluidity. The ego hates this. It wants clarity without vulnerability, devotion without surrender, intimacy without reflection. So when she embodies paradox, he calls her chaos. He cannot see that her unpredictability is his unconscious in motion, stirring the stagnant waters of his self-concept. When he first met her, she seemed like calm beauty, perhaps even salvation. But beauty in the Jungian sense is dangerous, for it awakens instinct before consciousness is ready. He mistook attraction for compatibility, but the unconscious is not interested in comfort. It seeks balance. Where he is rigid, it sends flow. Where he is guarded, it sends risk. Where he is numb, it sends feeling. The woman arrives not to decorate his life, but to destabilize it in the name of integration. Her presence is catalytic. She becomes a mirror that exposes both his longing and his fragmentation. Her love seems to nourish, but it also threatens to unmask him. The deeper she loves, the more she sees. And when she begins to see what he hides, he starts to retreat. He tells himself he is protecting peace, but he is protecting control. He fears being consumed by what he cannot understand. Yet the very thing he fears, the loss of boundaries, is the threshold through which his heart must pass to grow whole. You have felt this tension, the push and pull between wanting her and fearing her power. You wanted to be known but not seen, desired but not devoured. The woman's gaze frightened you because it carried recognition. It saw not who you claimed to be, but who you were beneath the defenses. That is why her love both healed and humiliated you. It made you visible to yourself. Every man's anima begins as enchantment and ends as mirror. The enchantment binds him to projection. The mirror frees him from it. But that freedom demands a sacrifice, the death of the persona that cannot sustain intimacy. He must lose the image he presents to the world, the identity that depends on control and admiration. To love a woman deeply is to watch the false self erode. Few endure that erosion with awareness. Most flee before the mirror completes its work. When he withdraws, she feels the abandonment of soul. Her instincts sense that something has been left unfinished, a pattern half seen. She begins to carry the weight of his repression, expressing the chaos he denies. Her emotions intensify, not because she is unstable, but because she is now living the shadow both are avoiding. The more he detaches, the more she becomes emotional. The more she expresses, the more he detaches. The cycle closes like a trap. What they call incompatibility is often unconscious division. He embodies the logos, the principle of order, reason, distance. She embodies the eros, the principle of connection, feeling, flow. Together they are meant to bring psyche into balance. But if he clings to logos without allowing eros, logic becomes weapon. And if she clings to eros without grounding, emotion becomes storm. The conflict that breaks them is the psyche's attempt to reconcile opposites. When separation finally comes, it is not the end of love but the exposure of its true purpose. Each carries the other's projection as psychic residue. He walks with the ghost of her passion. She walks with the echo of his silence. Both are haunted by what the other symbolized. This haunting is not punishment, it is integration in progress. The psyche reclaims what it once projected. You will notice this haunting in the smallest ways, in the quiet moments when memory stirs, not with pain but with strange recognition. Her scent in a stranger's laughter, her presence in a forgotten song. These are not signs of unfinished business, but fragments of your own anima returning home. They no longer belong to her, they belong to you. Regret deepens when you resist this return. You keep replaying the story, looking for proof that it could have ended differently, but there was no other ending possible. The relationship was never about completion, it was about confrontation. The soul arranged it so you could see yourself, even if that sight came through loss. One day, the longing quiets, not because you have forgotten her, but because you have remembered yourself, the energy that once clung to. Her form begins to circulate within. The love you projected outward becomes inner coherence. This is the first step towards sovereignty, the ability to hold the feminine within without needing her to carry it for you. A man who reaches this point does not speak of regret the same way. His sorrow becomes sacred. He no longer wants her back. He wants the awareness she awakened to remain. Through her absence, he learns presence. Through her silence, he learns depth. The mirror is gone, but the image remains imprinted in the soul. And slowly, clarity replaces longing. Clarity arrives quietly, not as insight or revelation, but as stillness after collapse. The mind has exhausted its questions. The heart, its resistance. What remains is an unfamiliar calm, the kind that no longer seeks meaning in her absence, but sees meaning as the shape her absence carved. This is the terrain of the shadow, the unlit landscape where projection dissolves. He begins to recognize that what once appeared as her faults, her distance, her mood, her complexity, were not intrusions into love but messages from the unconscious. Each tension, each misalignment, was a precise mirror reflecting his own fragmentation. The masculine psyche is conditioned to separate emotion from identity. He builds his worth through structure, productivity, control. The moment emotion interrupts that rhythm, he experiences it as threat. But emotion is not threat, it is data. It reveals where the psyche resists life. The woman he once loved was not the cause of his turmoil, she was the messenger carrying it. When she cried for closeness, she voiced the tenderness he repressed. When she withdrew, she mirrored his avoidance. When she demanded truth, she embodied the part of him that longed to be known. Each gesture was an archetypal echo, inviting him toward integration. But the ego prefers accusation to awareness. It is easier to call her difficult than to face one's own distance from soul. You may recognize this defense in yourself, the need to maintain dignity by intellectualizing pain. You explain, analyze, justify, but do not feel. This is the masculine wound, mistaking detachment for strength. Yet detachment is not power, it is fear disguised as clarity. Real strength is the capacity to stay present in discomfort without controlling it. The woman's presence challenged you not because she was volatile, but because she was alive. Her emotional intensity was the psyche's way of forcing your feeling function awake. The unconscious does not speak in logic, it speaks in energy. It floods you with attraction, conflict, longing, until the boundaries of intellect begin to crack. If you resist, it escalates. If you surrender, it transforms. But surrender is the one act the unintegrated ego cannot bear. It confuses surrender with defeat. And so you defended. You minimized her pain, rationalized your withdrawal, convinced yourself that peace required distance. But peace built on repression always ends in regret. The moment she left, everything you suppressed re-emerged. The silence became unbearable precisely because it mirrored your inner emptiness. What you called her intensity was simply the emotional life you had exiled. In Jungian language, this is the anima's rebellion. When the inner feminine is ignored, she externalizes. She takes form in the world as a woman who both attracts and destabilizes. Through her, the unconscious demands relationship. She will stay only until you begin to listen within. Once her work is done, she withdraws, often through heartbreak. It is not cruelty, it is initiation. Regret is the residue of resisted initiation. It is the echo of a lesson postponed. You are not mourning her, you are mourning your delay in seeing what she revealed. The psyche speaks through timing as much as through image. You met her when your consciousness was ready to expand but unwilling to yield. The relationship became the pressure chamber where expansion was forced through rupture. Now in solitude, the fragments of projection return one by one. You remember the way she looked at you, not as lover but as mirror. You recall her intuition, her moods, her capacity to feel everything you avoided. Slowly, you understand. She was not the storm. She was the weather system required to break your drought. The shadow does not integrate through understanding alone. It integrates through embodiment. The man who sees his projection must now live differently, less defended, more awake. He must allow emotion to move through him without interpreting it as weakness. He must let desire lead not to conquest, but to connection. Only then does the anima move from projection to presence, from woman to inner guide. You might think of her still not as loss but as symbol. She stands in your psyche now, no longer outside you. Her image softens, her voice quiets. What once felt like memory begins to feel like guidance. You start to sense that she never truly left, she merely changed form. Every time you choose empathy over judgment, she speaks. Every time you allow silence instead of control, she breathes. Her shadow is now your intuition, her tenderness your depth. The woman is gone, but the anima remains, woven into the fabric of your awareness. And so the paradox resolves itself. You only regret her when you mistake her absence for emptiness. But emptiness is not void. It is space newly cleared for soul. What once felt like grief begins to feel like gravity. You are being pulled inward, toward the very center she once represented. Inward is where the illusion dies. The outer story fades, but the psychic field remains charged. You walk through ordinary life, yet beneath it runs a quiet undercurrent, something ancient, something waiting. The woman's departure is no longer a wound. It is a doorway. What once tore you apart now draws you down into yourself, into the deep architecture of the masculine soul. Here, in the silence between thought and feeling, you meet the forgotten parts. The abandoned boy, the exiled lover, the hidden poet. Each had been traded for control. You begin to realize that your life was not built from freedom but from avoidance. The love you offered was conditional because it was filtered through defense. Now, stripped of projection, you see how much of what you called strength was simply fear polished into virtue. The masculine without the feminine becomes sterile, efficient, predictable. It measures everything but feels nothing. It builds walls of reason and calls them wisdom. But wisdom without feeling is architecture without fire. The woman's presence had once disturbed that cold perfection. Now her absence exposes it. You begin to sense how deeply you depended on her to keep your inner life alive. When a man loses the woman who held his projection, the psyche enters mourning not for her, but for the collapse of its false order. This collapse is sacred. It dismantles the empire of control so the sovereign of consciousness can emerge. The sovereign does not rule through dominance. He rules through awareness. He no longer fears the feminine within, for he understands she is the source of his creativity, empathy, and depth. You start to feel her shadow as presence, not haunting but guidance. When you listen, she speaks through dreams, through subtle emotion, through the quiet intuition that asks you to slow down. The anima becomes inner compass, no longer external muse. She no longer demands to be loved through another. She asks to be honored within. This is the stage Jung called individuation, the integration of opposites into wholeness. The man who reaches it no longer divides his nature into masculine and feminine, mind and emotion, strength and tenderness. He becomes vessel for both. The woman was the catalyst. Her withdrawal is the completion. What began as romance becomes ritual. In this ritual, every memory transforms into meaning. The laughter becomes instruction in openness. The arguments become lessons in shadow. The silence becomes teaching in surrender. Even regret becomes holy. It marks the place where awareness entered through loss. You begin to see how the psyche uses love to lead you toward consciousness. It first seduces, then breaks, then rebuilds. But this rebuilding is not dramatic. It unfolds quietly in moments of self-recognition. You find yourself responding differently to pain, to beauty, to others. You stop demanding certainty from relationship because you have met uncertainty within. You stop blaming women for your wounds because you have faced the part of you that fears them. You stop chasing completion because you have felt the completeness of solitude. She becomes less of a memory and more of a symbol, an emblem of your own awakening. When she appears in thought now, you feel gratitude rather than longing. Her image no longer stings, it steadies. She has become archetype, no longer personal but universal. Through her, you have met the eternal feminine, the soul's own rhythm of creation and destruction. Still, the mind occasionally revisits the old question, could it have been different? The ego whispers that awareness came too late, but the psyche knows timing is exact. You could not have understood her until she was gone. The mirror must shatter for the image to be seen. The love that once blinded now reveals. Every man, if he is honest, must lose his anima once to truly find her. The first loss breaks him open, the second meeting occurs within. What you once sought in her eyes, you now find in silence. What you once begged from her affection, you now give yourself in presence. The polarity collapses, not into emptiness but into unity. From this unity, a new kind of love becomes possible. Not the projection-driven hunger that seeks completion, but the conscious exchange that arises between two integrated beings. A love where neither saves nor devours. A love that holds difference without fear. And when such love arrives, it feels less like passion and more like recognition. It carries the same charge as the first, but without illusion. You do not grasp it, you witness it. The woman before you is no longer your missing part. She is her own whole meeting yours. The man who reaches this point does not speak in regret. He speaks in reverence. He knows that every heartbreak was initiation, every loss a descent, every descent a return to soul. The shadow he once blamed in her has become the ground of his maturity. And in that stillness, he finally understands. She was never his to lose. She was the language through which his soul learned to speak. T-awareness has no ceremony. It arrives after every illusion has been exhausted, after the noise of memory has softened into understanding. The man does not wake one morning healed. He simply notices that the ache has changed temperature. What once burned now glows. What once felt like loss now feels like space. In this space, he encounters the woman again, not in body but in essence. She is everywhere now, diffused through the texture of life itself. The smell of rain carries her tone. The curve of light against the wall echoes her softness. But this time, he does not chase the reflection. He receives it. He no longer seeks her to escape himself. He sees her in everything because he has met her within. The shadow that once terrified him has become intimacy. He understands now that every woman he loved was the psyche's attempt to reconcile polarity, to bring eros and logos, feeling and thought, body and soul, into dialogue. Each relationship was a language the unconscious used to communicate its longing for wholeness. What he called failure was often the soul's success in forcing him toward awareness. It was never about keeping her. It was about becoming capable of meeting her truth without defense. When the man can do that, love no longer needs to destroy him to wake him. It can refine him instead. The fire that once consumed becomes the fire that illuminates. You feel this shift not as victory but as quiet dignity. The same heart that once panicked in her absence now breathes in solitude. You begin to sense a deeper rhythm beneath your desire, a current of awareness that does not cling, does not fear, does not demand. This is the birth of inner authority. The sovereign rises not by mastering others but by mastering perception. He sees that all control was fear disguised as order. Fear of the feminine, fear of emotion, fear of death. He had once believed that freedom meant independence. Now he sees that freedom means integration. To be whole is to no longer fear the opposite. The feminine within no longer threatens him because he understands her language, movement, intuition, chaos that is not destruction but renewal. Every man who has truly loved knows this truth too late. He did not want her body as much as he wanted her permission, to feel, to soften, to exist without armor. When she left, that permission vanished, and he mistook it for abandonment. But the anima does not abandon. She withdraws so that he may internalize her function. What he once received through her presence must now arise from within. And so begins the alchemy of solitude. He learns to speak to himself in the same tone she once used. He listens without judgment, feels without fleeing. In doing so, he restores the bridge between consciousness and unconscious. The woman's image becomes the living symbol of that bridge, the gateway between reason and soul. In Jungian terms, this is the reconciliation of opposites. The ego no longer fights the shadow, it dialogues with it. The masculine no longer fears the feminine, it honors her wisdom. The outer world reflects this harmony. His relationships become mirrors, not battlegrounds. His words gain gravity because they emerge from awareness, not defense. His eyes hold softness, not strategy. The transformation is subtle but absolute. The man who once needed love to feel whole now loves because he is whole. He no longer confuses intensity with connection, nor silence with safety. He can stand in both passion and peace without losing center. The woman who enters his life now does not carry his soul, she meets it. This is the moment regret dissolves. It does not vanish through forgetting, but through understanding. Regret cannot survive when meaning has been integrated. He does not look back in longing, but in recognition. Every memory becomes scripture. Every mistake becomes map. The love that ended becomes the threshold through which consciousness entered. And in that final awareness, he sees the deeper pattern, that the soul uses separation to lead toward union, not with another, but with itself. The woman's shadow was the portal. Her leaving was not punishment, it was completion. The story had to end for the archetype to reveal itself. She no longer lives in his memory, she lives in his maturity. The qualities he adored in her intuition, compassion, and jewel presence now move through him. What he once chased, he now embodies. The circle has closed. There is nothing left to regret because nothing was wasted. Every desire, every argument, every silence served the evolution of awareness. The man who once begged for her return now understands. She never truly left. She was never outside him to begin with. He no longer blames her. He meets the woman inside himself. She no longer needs closure. She finds clarity. When awareness arrives, the story no longer has power, only meaning.